Climate change is happening and global deforestation is a key driver. The way humans use land is for mostly farming and deforestation, which accounts for around a quarter of global emission. Deforestation alone accounts for 5.2 gigatons of CO2. The biggest cause of this deforestation is the production of agricultural commodities such as cattle, cocoa, soy, timber, and palm oil. But these products provide jobs and livelihoods for more than 1.6 billion people, and we all use them in some form or the other. However, global markets currently reward destructive practices rather than sustainable ones, and this needs to change. But we need to do this in partnership with genuine collaboration so we can take bold and aligned action to deliver a transition that works for us all. This is why the UK and Indonesia have set up and are co-chairing a new initiative known as the FACT Dialogue. Forest and carbon-rich ecosystems are vital in our fight against climate change. More than 1 billion people rely on them for their livelihoods, and well over half the world's land-based species of plants and animals call them home. Agriculture and farming supports us all, but sometimes farmers aren't supported. Farmers and their families need a stable market and a fair price for their produce if they are to make a living. We want to make sure that their voices are included, that they have access to finance to invest in their businesses, and that they are supported to grow food sustainably and efficiently in ways that are good for people and the planet. Commodity is a jargony word, but what we are talking about here is food. Everyone can play a part in transforming the way the world produces, consumes, and thinks about food. We all have choices about what we buy, and by using modern technology, we can trace the origin of agricultural commodities. This means that when we buy products with a label showing food has been produced sustainably, we can be sure that our actions are making a positive difference. Trade in food products is global, so we need global solutions. This is why we have brought together governments of the largest importers and exporters to make trade sustainable. The G7 have backed the FACT Dialogue, and we are working with partner nations around the world to develop a shared approach to sustainability, aligning the efforts of importers and exporters. In doing so, helping to protect the climate, look after nature, and improve the livelihoods of millions of people across Africa, Asia, and Latin America. These 30 participating countries will announce their collective actions at the COP26 Climate Conference in Glasgow. We need to act as a whole, as a system, as one united team. Now is the time to deliver change and act to protect our precious forest, together for our planet. Climate change is...
All right, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all who have joined us. Welcome. Welcome to Climate Week, and welcome to our session on Forest, Agriculture, and Commodity Trade FACT Dialogue, Solutions for Systemic Change. I am your host for this hour that we have together. My name is Carolina Brandão. I am the lead for COP26 Mobilization for the Tropical Forest Alliance. So for those of you who don't know us, we are an initiative hosted by the World Economic Forum, and we are supporting the COP presidency with the FACT Dialogue. So a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. This is a webinar structure, which means that people wouldn't be able to come in and ask your questions live, but we do have the Q&A function so that you can ask your questions throughout. These can be answered live by the panelists, either in the chat or later on in the session. So please do feel free to pop in your questions in the chat. Also for you to know, our session today is being recorded, and that recording will be shared afterwards. So our objectives for today are twofold. One is to hear a little bit of a fact update. The the FACT dialogue is being led by the COP presidency, so we want to hear what's the latest on the government discussions, the structure of the dialogue, the issues it's trying to address. And then after that, we'll hear a little bit about some of the innovative solutions that are out there, being led by other stakeholders outside of government. So for that, we have a very exciting lineup for today. We're hearing from Uplink challenge submissions, so great innovators and people on the ground that are leading on this. We have Diego, we have Victoria, Andrew, Charlotte, Diego, Haxfield. So lots of exciting stuff coming your way. But with that, let's get started. First, to set the stage, let me welcome David Saddington to tell us a little bit about what's happening with the sustainable agriculture and sustainable commodity production agenda in the run-up to COP. David is the head of International Nature Campaign for COP26 at the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, BEIS, and has been leading on this. So David, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you, and you have the floor.
Thanks so much, Carolina. A real pleasure to be here this afternoon. Yeah, I'm really excited to hear on some of the innovations which are coming up. But first of all, I just want to take it back a little bit around sort of why we have chosen to put nature right at the heart of COP26, and within that topic, the deforestation, which of course the Uplink challenges is focused on. I've worked on a number of COPs before, my first in the UK government here, and I am so thrilled to see sort of nature right at the heart of this COP. I think certainly people who have been working in the space for a while think this is very long overdue, and we're very pleased that the Prime Minister and Lord Goldsmith, the nature champion for COP, have decided to really have nature right at the heart of our presidency at Glasgow and the year ahead. And this really is because there is absolutely no way we can keep 1.5 degrees alive without serious action when it comes to tackling emissions from agriculture, forestry, deforestation and other forms of land use. It's around a quarter of global emissions. So there is absolutely no chance of meeting the goals of the Paris Agreement unless we really scale up and speed up action when it comes to deforestation. We have focused a lot of our efforts on tackling deforestation in tropical areas, and this is a very targeted intervention, recognizing that around 80% of tropical forest loss in some parts of the world can be directly linked to the global production and trade in agricultural commodities. And for a long time, this has been a very fractious space. There's a lot of different voices, a lot of different legitimate concerns. And what we felt was really needed here is actually to bring those voices together for the very first time in order to collaborate, because we believe, and it is one of the principles of COP26, that international collaboration, through international collaboration, we can achieve so much more than working in silos by ourselves. So for the FACT dialogue, as you saw in the animation, and the forest, agricultural and commodity trade dialogue, we are bringing together the 30 largest governments, those representing the largest importers of those commodities, such as the G7, Korea, Japan, for example, and the largest exporters, so those countries in the tropical forest regions, Brazil, Peru, Colombia, Ghana, and of course, Indonesia, who are co-chairing this exciting dialogue with us. And over the past year, we have been meeting at ministerial level, at senior official level, to actually bring together these voices closer together. And we have been very kindly supported by Carolina, Felipe, and the full team at the Tropical Forest Alliance to make sure that these governments are hearing the voices of business, of civil society, because this is certainly where some of that innovation, that real forward-leaning ambition is coming from. We have structured the dialogue in relation to 4 different thematic areas. So all of the discussions and the final product the roadmap of action, which will be unveiled at COP26 in Glasgow, will be structured around 4 key themes. The first is trade, recognizing that we do need trade policy to incentivize sustainable production and disincentivize damaging practices. So how can we work together across producer and consumer governments to bring trade policies which are mutually reinforcing? The second area is supporting smallholders, recognizing that smallholder farmers are really at the forefront of this transition. It is critical to tackle deforestation in order to mitigate the climate emergency and restore global biodiversity, but we must not lose sight that the supply chains of these commodities support the livelihoods of over 1 billion people around the world, many of them smallholders. So we want to make sure that we are absolutely sort of put that at the heart of the dialogue. And when we're talking about tackling deforestation, we are also talking around development and supporting that sustainable economic growth. The third area is around transparency and traceability. How do we know if we're making a difference? How do we have the verification through satellites, through technology, through data? And of course, this is being very much driven as a investor demand now, as more and more businesses are looking to invest and know that their finances are going into sustainable rather than unsustainable or possibly even illegal commodity production. And the fourth area is around research, development and innovation. And this is recognizing that we can do a huge amount to scale up agricultural productivity on land, which therefore reduces the pressure from farmers to expand into forest areas. So those are our 4 key themes: trade, smallholders, transparency and traceability, and research, development and innovation. And we are currently developing the roadmap. Ministers will meet on the 6th of October in a ministerial roundtable, and we'll be preparing the FACT roadmap to be unveiled at the World Leaders Summit on Forest and Land Use, which the Prime Minister will be speaking at on the 2nd of November. So hope that you are following that journey. It's an absolute pleasure to be supporting the Uplink Challenge and to hear around some of these fantastic innovations coming through. I look forward to getting stuck into some of the judging with the team in the coming weeks. But for now, back to you, Carolina, and for the rest of the session. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, David. It's really helpful and encouraging to hear that these issues are being highlighted by the FACT process, and especially because it creates this space for global South and global North countries to come together to discuss it. That's very much needed at the moment. Something for us to consider is that also solutions won't come from just one stakeholder. FACT is mainly a government to government discussion, but we can turn to other actors, civil society, private sector, academia. Everyone has a key role to play, and so much is being done already. And so TFA is coming in here also trying to support the dialogue, trying to highlight some of that action that we see from other stakeholders. And so with this in mind, we went into partnership with Uplink. Uplink, it's the World Economic Forum's open digital platform for crowdsourcing innovations to address the world's most pressing challenges and try to accelerate progress. So for context, for the people here, there have been several challenges run to date on plastics, reforestation, education, circular economy, clean energy, a number of things. Apparently 2,407 contributions have been done to date, so it has a really impressive reach since its launch in Davos of January 2020. So it's really exciting, and what it tries to do is to source innovative solutions from around the world and try to help them join forces with a trusted community of leading organizations, experts, investors, change makers to try to deliver impact at scale. So with this in mind, we created one particular Uplink challenge related to FACT, and we'll hear about some of the solutions that have been submitted through that process. But before we do that, I want to call Diego Saez, who is the CEO of Pachama, and he was part of a previous challenge, a Trillion Trees Challenge. And so he was part of the cohort for that process, and he has gone through the whole Uplink challenge cycle. So Diego, it would be really great to hear a little bit about your project, your initiative, and how that process has been with Uplink as well in terms of scaling up and connecting you. So welcome, and you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Carolina, and everyone attending the session. I am co-founder and CEO of a startup called Pachama that has a mission of helping protect and restore nature as a solution to climate change. And I always like to start, next slide. I always like to start with my personal story because I grew up in the north of Argentina in the Yunga tropical forest that connects with the Amazon rainforest. And you know, I spend every summer at my grandparents' house in the forest. So I have a personal deep connection with those ecosystems. And life found me in Silicon Valley building technology companies. So I thought that I could put that experience at the service of helping protect and restore forest. Next slide. So what we do with the company is really trying to help accelerate the world of forest carbon markets with technology, and particularly trying to bring more efficiency, more transparency, more trust by using the latest technologies. Next slide. What we do is basically observe forests from space and use artificial intelligence to make predictions about key aspects of reforestation forest conservation projects, such as what is the baseline of biomass or carbon sequestration, what is the deforestation rate, what is the risk of a particular area of being deforested in the next few years, and how is that gonna affect climate, how many tons of CO2 are going to be emitted by the deforestation. Next slide. What's unique about our approach is that we pull in a lot of different types of remote sensing data. Today we have high definition satellite images coming from private providers. We have LiDAR scans collected by airplanes that fly above the Amazon rainforest. We have radar that comes from the European Space Agency. We have LiDAR coming from the International Space Station. And then we have field plots collected by foresters around the world that serve as ground truth to train artificial intelligence algorithms that then can make those predictions. Next slide. And that has allowed us to develop a historical model that we can go back into 1984 all the way to today and observe what happened, and then come up with these baselines of deforestation that are used to determine what is the additionality of a project. We have built as well a validation model that tells us how much carbon is there today on every single pixel of a forest map, and then a monitoring model that allows us to detect changes on the canopy cover as the projects evolve. Next slide. And then what we do with this is we partner with projects around the world that are protecting or restoring nature. Some are REDD+ projects, other are improved forest management projects, but we use our data to vet those projects and to provide more transparency and trust so that more buyers can finance and can invest on those projects. Next slide. And that data provides, again, new sources of revenue for landowners around the world. Next slide. We're working already with some of the biggest technology companies in Silicon Valley and around the world that are investing on those projects, providing an alternative source of income for the owners of those forests. Next slide. And to give you an example, this is a RED Plus project in Brazil, next slide, that we have been monitoring and following from space. Next slide. And here's an example of a project in California that is an improved forest management in which redwoods are protected. Next slide. And again, we're visualizing every single acre, estimating the carbon sequestration of the forest. Next slide. So I want to finish, by saying that yes, the Uplink platform has been transformational for us. We were able to raise capital from some of the best investors in Silicon Valley, Breakthrough Energy Ventures, Amazon, Lower Carbon, thanks to the visibility and the connections that Uplink has given us and the World Economic Forum as well. We were part of the Trillion Tree Initiative, and we also benefit from being part of this community of a lot of different innovators, technologies, and entrepreneurs from around the world that are trying to work on this very important mission. So I want to thank the opportunity and encourage everyone to be part of this community. Thank you.
Thanks, Diego, for sharing all of that with us. It's great to hear about Pachama, everything that you're doing. It's a different challenge, but it's so closely related to what we're trying to tackle here as well. So it's great to hear that and to hear a little bit about your journey with Uplink. For the FACT dialogue, we created an Uplink challenge called the Tropical Forest Commodities Challenge. And I guess the approach that we were taking for this challenge was that, given the fact that this issue is multifaceted, there are overlapping problems, as David was mentioning in the beginning of the session, all of these topics are connected somehow. So we do need to approach it with a systemic lens to try to solve the issue. And so the Tropical Forest Commodities Challenge was opened, calling for innovative and systemic approaches to help balance the need for agricultural demand, while also sustaining livelihoods, ensuring economic development, and protecting nature and biodiversity. So we all know it's a huge challenge, but there's so much exciting stuff that's already happening on the ground. So how can we make those connections and have a more holistic approach? The challenge was opened for from the July 16th until the 3rd of September. So it was a good 2 months there, and we received 82 submissions total, which is really, really exciting. And we're very much looking forward to getting into the detail of all those submissions. They are currently being evaluated by an expert panel, and the very final selection will be announced at COP during Nature Day, which will be November 6th. So we're really looking forward to that. So this panel that we're going to have now is really a taste at some of the great submissions that we've had so far. It'll be great to hear about some of the work that's already been done and how you think that those can be scaled up and have broader reach, because as it was previously mentioned during the session, innovation has a really key role to play in how we think about policy and how we tackle the issue. So with that, let me introduce our panel of speakers. Each one of them is going to come forward and talk a little bit about their submission. So we have Victoria Alonsoperez, who's the founder and CEO of Chipsafer, Andrew Dudley, who's the co-founder of Earth, Charlotte Opal, who is the executive director of the Forest Conservation Fund, and Diego Haxfield, a founder of Cultiva. So without further ado, let me call in Victoria to tell us a little bit about Chipsafer.
Hi everyone, thank you very much for the invitation to be here. Next slide, please. When I was a teenager, foot and mouth disease outbreak, that is an illness on the cattle, severely affected the economy of my country, Uruguay, and of the whole region, because a lot of the animals had to be killed and we couldn't export any more beef. So I started thinking if there could be a system capable of detecting diseases in the livestock remotely and prevent an epidemic from happening. Many years later, after I graduated as an electronics engineer, I realized that I could use the technology that I was using, which was aerospace, to create a wearable that the animals could wear and so monitor them remotely. And then we started Chipsafer. Next slide, please. And but then we realized that there was a lot more things that farmers were facing, such as livestock theft, inefficient grazing or overgrazing, and lack of traceability, which cost farmers billions of dollars every year. Next slide, please. And so at Chipsafer, our mission is to improve the welfare and security of livestock while enabling sustainable farming and providing traceability across the whole animal's life cycle. Next slide, please. And in order to do this, what we do is we have a platform that can track and detect anomalies in cattle behavior completely remotely and autonomously. So we have created our own device. Next slide, please. Which has a number of different features and that transmits information about the animal's performance to our company server. Next slide, please. In this, so in our own standalone software, the farmer can log in from anywhere around the world and see where the animals are and receive warnings if an animal goes beyond a specified perimeter or if an anomaly in the movement is detected. Also, we have the whole animal database, the genealogy, and the whole traceability of the animal. Next slide, please. And we are also working with satellite imagery to correlate the data from our sensors with satellite imagery to realize if an area is going to be overgrazed. Because if it's overgrazed, we asked the farmer to rotate the animal so that you give enough time for the field to regenerate. And also, we are working to be able to detect if a farm is emitting or sequestering carbon, so as to show if the farm is sustainable or not. Next slide, please. But we're not only trying to impact the farmers, we're also trying to impact the whole meat chain, giving more transparency to it. Because with the active traceability of Chipsafer, you can know at all times where the animals have been and prevent what is called as cattle laundering. Because the farmer, with the data from Chipsafer, we can assure where the animal was at all times and assure that the animals were not in protected areas, such as the Amazon rainforest, for example. Next slide, please. Right now in the company, we are in our growth stage, and we have a team in Uruguay, in Brazil, and in Singapore. And in Singapore, we are manufacturing all of our devices together with the company Flex, so we can mass produce as many devices as we want. And next slide, please. And we are working with several customers around the world. And one of them is the company Securitas, in which we are working with them to give the farmers more peace of mind by telling them by ensuring the safety and welfare of the animals. Securitas is a security company, so we help them especially with the cattle theft, which is one of the biggest issues in Latin America. Next slide, please. And then to finalize about Uplink, for us, we decided to apply because it would be a great opportunity for us. But also in 2018, we had the great privilege of being selected as one of the 50 startups to go to the World Economic Forum in Sao Paulo. And this was an amazing opportunity. We got to meet other startups from Latin America, which I started the company in Uruguay. There were not so many social entrepreneurs when I started. And so it was a great way to meet other social entrepreneurs, which, you know, the entrepreneurship journey is something that has a lot of ups and downs. So being able to have a network is super important. And many of the people I met there are still my friends, and we're still very much in contact. And we made great connections. So it was a really amazing opportunity for us. And we really look forward to being selected, if possible, for this acceleration program to be able to pass to the next level. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Victoria. Very, very good to hear, and just great to hear that you are already making use of the Uplink sort of network that you're already involved in, and now thinking how what Chipsafer does and how it relates to the FACT dialogue. There's support to farmers, and then it's relevant to the transparency and traceability work. So really interesting to hear. Let me turn now to Andrew, who is going to speak a little bit about Earth. Andrew, welcome.
Thank you, Carolina. So yeah, my name is Andrew. I am CEO and co-founder of Earth. Next slide, please. We're a public benefit corporation based out of the US, and we have, as part of being a public benefit, a charter that enshrines kind of the public benefit that we're looking to serve, and this is to build technology and strategic partnerships for the protection of our forests, oceans, biodiversity, and human rights. Next slide, please. What's happened in recent years is quite exciting. Is the US government and the UK government have really been developing legislation and new laws. The UK government, for example, has been leading the way with the UK Modern Slavery Act, and also more recently developing laws to protect rainforests and clean up supply chains. The US government, on the other side, is focused very much in on the human rights aspect. The US Customs and Border Protection last year issued 13 withhold release orders. One example here is one that was filed against a palm oil corporation in Malaysia called Sime Darby, which results now in their palm oil being blocked from import into the United States until they can prove that the palm oil has not been produced with any forms of slave labor or human rights abuses. And also Terry Collingsworth, a human rights attorney, has also been challenging several large corporations for their role in slave labor in supply chains as well. But all told, what's beginning to happen is corporations are becoming more or increasingly risk averse, buying commodities in the usual way. They're looking for safer sources of supply that protect them from this evolving legislation and regulation. Next slide, please. So Earth, what we do is we establish a direct digital connection between farmers, their workers, with corporations seeking ESG compliant commodities. Next slide, please. And how we do that, we have this platform. It's a kind of human-centric geographical information system, or GIS, and it brings in data from a variety of sources, most notably the smartphone, satellite imagery, soil sensors, drone imagery, and cattle tracking. But it allows us to give improved situational awareness of where these farms are and who exactly is working on these farms on the ground. So every worker is identified and registered within the system. Next slide, please. And so we're really excited by the prospect of regenerative agroforestry. It's a very traditional form of farming, and it's a farming method that can help feed a growing population and at the same time solve the climate crisis. It helps improve soil fertility and biodiversity, of course, enhances food security, turns degraded land into carbon sinks, controls pests and weeds, and more importantly, improves the economic security and well-being of farmers, families, and the wider community. Next slide, please. So kind of the methodology behind our system is this red line is a virtual geofence boundary around the smallholder farm. And then within that farm, the farmer can register each of the trees, and that's the geolocation of the tree, the age and circumference. And this allows us to set an average baseline of what that tree can produce in estimated yield. And of course, as I said before, every worker is also registered, so they have a unique ID and profile within the farm. And when they go to work using their smartphone, they check into the virtual boundary. So we know, even though the phone is offline, and the farmer is actually present within that virtual geofence boundary. And we achieve this using the standard smartphone's GNSS chipset. So we know where the worker is at any time. But that allows us to establish an average pick rate. So we understand how many hours that these people are working and what the average pick rate is. And that gives us an estimated output of what that farm and worker can introduce into the supply chain. And at the very bottom, we see the verification. So this is a concept called the community auditor. Last year, there was an expose in the Washington Post newspaper that focused on Rainforest Alliance and UTS as one of the largest certification brands in the marketplace. One of the challenges is that out of 1,000 farms, apparently in West Africa, these were cacao farms, they only actually physically visited 32. And if those 32 passed, then the whole 1,000 would pass. And obviously that methodology is not so tight, basically, that there's a lot of problems that can happen as a result of that. So the community auditor concept is, what if we can engage local members of the community? This could be a housewife or homemaker, and her job is to download the app, discover that there's 500 smallholder farms within 50 miles of her home. And her job is to go and visit these farmers to check that the farmers registered the trees correctly. There's no underage workers working there, and the workers are identified and registered also. Next slide, please. We're really proud of our partnership with Planet Labs based out of San Francisco. They have this fleet or constellation of 200 satellites providing satellite imagery from 3-meter resolution right down to 0.5 meter resolution. And that really provides us with an opportunity to be able to verify what we're seeing on the ground through our smartphone application, and signing off that a farm does exist and there's no deforestation happening in the region as well or around the farm. Next slide, please. So the ILO indicators, this is kind of the basis of how the US Customs and Border Protection were able to block the imports of certain companies for violating these indicators, but they're pretty serious issues that are happening to workers throughout the world. Billions of workers are being impacted by this. Through our system, we can ask the workers if it's a plantation and they don't have a smartphone yet. We're probably another 5 to 10 years before smartphones become really common throughout the equatorial tropics. But they can select the smiley face here with whether they're sad or happy. You may have seen this technology in airports, but it immediately allows us to gauge the temperature of a plantation or a farm. If they want to log in and register and leave more of a detailed report, that they can do that as well. And this can be anonymous within the system. If they don't have access to a smartphone, and these tablets can be strategically located at the plantation's entrance or exit, or they can go to the local community cooperative where these stations could be provided by the forward-facing brand or corporation. Next slide, please. We're really excited as well by the opportunity of, not just being able to attract a premium price for a farmer that is able to deliver to a corporation an ESG compliant commodity, but also there's many opportunities with carbon offsets. So as we know, with regenerative agroforestry, you're mixing trees within the farm, they're going to absorb carbon. That allows us to sell these carbon offsets on the expansive CBL exchange. And also futures contracts through the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. So think about different ways that how we can improve the economic stability of these farmers. Because all told, if the farmer doesn't succeed with his job or succeed with the farm, there's a chance that he might close the farm. And then the end result then is that the corporations don't have access to the commodities they need to develop their products. Just to introduce Earth Live is also another venture that we have. It's a webcast that features interviews with people working on the front lines of conservation, sustainability, and human rights. We invite you to check that out. We have a lot of interviews with people like Terry Collingsworth, who's the human rights attorney I mentioned earlier, and Anna Hinojosa is the director of the US Customs and Border Protection. It's really leading this charge against the corporations and encouraging them to clean up their supply chains. And lastly, we're really honored to speak here today, and we hope that through the increased visibility that Uplink can provide, we can help show corporations that technologies like ours and the other guys on the call today can really help to improve forestry and agriculture. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Andrew. It's really encouraging and exciting to hear about Earth. And I think you end up tackling a number of different aspects that are relevant to the FACT dialogue, like smallholder support, market transformation, transparency, and traceability. But thinking beyond that, even incorporating the human rights piece within the discussion, I think is incredibly important, and something as we move towards a forest positive approach rather than just clean supply chains, this is incredibly important for people to start considering. Let's move on to Charlotte, who is here to talk about the Forest Conservation Fund. Charlotte, welcome. You have the floor.
Thanks, Carolina. Nice segue. I'm going to talk about forest positive exactly. So great to be here today. My name is Charlotte Opal. I'm the Executive Director of the Forest Conservation Fund in Geneva. Next slide, please. We don't have to repeat it. We saw it in the video. The forests are disappearing ever faster. Then agriculture is still the #1 driver. 80% of deforestation is linked to agriculture, most of that commercial agriculture. And this is despite hundreds of companies really trying the hardest and investing in going deforestation free, writing the policies, talking with their suppliers. So why can we not fix this problem? And that's why we've launched the Forest Conservation Fund. Next slide, please. The problem is that businesses don't have the tools, all of the tools that they need to fight deforestation. So we've seen a lot of progress on transparency and traceability, companies talking to their suppliers, adopting good policies, buying certified products. But unfortunately, that doesn't actually stop deforestation for other markets and other companies that don't have these policies. So deforestation free and certification is not the same thing as actually protecting forests. So the forests are still going, even as these companies protect their clean up their supply chains. So what we're doing in the Forest Conservation Fund is providing a tool to actually make it easy for companies to protect forests and their supply chains, and not just avoid deforestation, but actually protect standing forests. Next slide, please. And by doing this, we're helping these companies also tap into these global movements that we heard about at the beginning of the hour. So half of our planet is still wild. We need to move that, only 15% of that is protected. So we need to move that into protection. There are these global deals being negotiated in Kunming next month, and then also at the COP to protect 30% of nature by 2030 and 50% by 2050. And this is a way for companies to engage in those big dialogues directly in their supply chains. And there's also new science coming out that shows that actually 1/3 of our intact forests are already protected by indigenous people and local communities. And they're doing a great job at it, better than any national park manager. And so if we can just recognize their rights and link them up with financial support to keep their forest standing, then we can secure their human rights to land, their livelihoods, and also contribute to fight climate change and the biodiversity crisis. So next slide, please. So that's what we're trying to do in the Forest Conservation Fund. So we launched last year. We're a Swiss foundation based in Geneva, and we're really an intermediary linking companies and brands, retailers, traders, buying in tropical landscapes with excellent conservation projects in those supply chains. So we work with community-based forests, and I'll show you a map on the next slide. It can be private sector, private landholders that want to set aside additional forests beyond what's required by law. It could be a nonprofit working with a national park or another landowner. And we send through the funding on a quarterly basis. We use satellite monitoring to make sure the forest is still standing. The community uses the funds to do their conservation activities, and then we repackage that information back to the donor. Next slide, please. So these are our first 9 projects. We have almost 100,000 hectares now identified, about 18% funded. We're working with communities in tropical commodity landscapes, so palm oil, coconut, cocoa, rubber, all the big ones, pulp and paper, coffee, and linking them with companies buying in those landscapes that want to actively protect forests. If you want to protect an area of forest equivalent to your plantation footprint, so think of it as a nature needs half kind of movement, it only adds 1 to 2% onto the cost of goods. So we're finding this is a really affordable way for companies to actively protect forests in their supply chains and really go forest positive. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to give you an example. This is one of our projects in Indonesia on the island of Borneo in East Kalimantan. It's this red shape here that you see in the middle, and it's bordered by pulp and paper plantations, palm oil plantations, so really at risk for deforestation for those commodities. Next slide, please. And 3 years ago, the community, it's an indigenous community, got their land tenure and to protect their forests. And so the Forest Conservation Fund has approved them as a project, and we are linking them up with donors like PZ Cousins in the UK or Waitrose supermarkets here in this picture, where they send the money through the Conservation Fund directly to the community, who uses the money to patrol the area for wardens and do biodiversity monitoring, and invest in alternative livelihoods that are forest friendly. And then you see here, this is a picture of the Waitrose supermarkets in the UK talking about this story, the forest positive story with their consumers. So it's also a way for them to shift the message from boycotts and deforestation and death and destruction to something that's more positive about investing in forest communities. So I think my time is up. I look forward to discussing this crazy idea with all of you. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Charlotte. Really, really exciting to see. And related to the fact dialogue, you're kind of attempting at market transformation, which is really, really important and relevant for what we're trying to do here. So next we have Diego, who is the founder of Cultiba. So let's move right on to Diego. Welcome, and you have the floor.
Great, thanks everyone, and thanks for the opportunity to share. I'll take you now to talk about smallholder farmers in Colombia. So Cultiba enables Colombian smallholder farmers to engage in agroforestry. Next slide, please. There's over 5 million Colombian smallholder farmers living on less than $1 a day. Now, about half of them own the land where they live, but it's the traditional challenge of they have limited capital to procure quality inputs. They're unable to invest in long-term plantations with high profit margins, and they lack access to markets and buyers, and it's the middleman or woman that keeps the profits. Next slide, please. On the environmental side, right now there's mass illegal deforestation of balsa trees across Colombia, driven by an increase in demand. So last year only, demand for balsa increased by 400%, reaching $800 million in global exports that we know, and probably a lot more than we don't know. The main market for balsa, for those that don't know, balsa wood, it's a very light wood and is the wind energy industry. So balsa is the strongest wood by weight in the world, which makes it a key input in the production of wind turbine blades. So they require about 150 cubic meters of balsa per 100 meter blade. So it's a lot of wood that is required, and the wind energy industry, as all of you know, is going fast, right? So over the last decade, it's been growing by about 10%, and it's getting steeper. So last year, it grew 25%. So more and more wood will be required, and supply is not enough, right? So what's happening is all these legal sustainable plantations cannot cope. And then once we don't have enough, they go and cut illegally from protected areas, and then all this wood is laundered by mixing it with other tree species. It's happening a lot in the Amazon right now, and yeah, we're starting to see the impact of that. Next slide, please. On a brighter side, balsa is an awesome tree. It's native to Colombia and these Latin America region, Ecuador, Brazil, and is used in agroforestry to improve soil quality, retaining water, reducing erosion. Commercially, it's also an exciting tree species. It grows really fast. It can be harvested after 5 years. That tree that you see there has around 4 years. So it's a nurse tree, grows quick and then protects all the other species in the ground. And to make it more attractive commercially, the Colombian government provides a forestry incentive, subsidizing 40% of setup costs and 50% of maintenance costs for 5 years. So that makes it attractive for private sector. Next slide, please. What we do, we enable Colombian smallholder farmers to engage to plant balsa trees in unproductive land alongside food crops that they already grow. So we're heavily inspired by a company in Kenya called Komaza, for those who know it. And so it's this partnership model where the farmer contributes what they already have. They have land, labor, security, and we contribute all those things that the farmer doesn't have. So all those things missing in the first slide: inputs, training, harvesting. We deal with the bureaucratic process of applying to forestry incentive, and we secure offtake agreements to guarantee fair market prices. We make it attractive to the farmer, the zero financial contribution for smallholder farmers, but by getting land and labor at zero cost, then we can plant trees cheaper than our competition and sell them at a cost competitive price, reducing demand for all these illegal plantations, reducing deforestation. And then on the farmer side, we aim to double their income, their current income earning around $10,000 per hectare planted. Last slide, please. And our journey with Uplink, we discovered Uplink through one of the innovations being showcased, I think, in the last round. It was EcoTree for us, and for us, it was a lot of inspiration. We were thinking about how we increase our cash flow to support smallholder farmers. So yeah, we were inspired by the solution they were doing, and it was being showcased through the Uplink network. So we joined also to share ideas and engage other entrepreneurs and be inspired by like all the ideas that have been showcased today, and also put ourselves out there and share the work we do, and hopefully if selected, get access to mentoring and exposure to a wider network of funders. I'll stop here, and thanks everyone.
Thanks a lot, Diego. Really, really great to hear, and a good segue. I think this is already an opportunity for us to start to create those networks and exchange and listen about all the exciting work that's being done out there. So thanks to all of you for coming on the session and sharing a little bit about the work that you're doing. And now I will open up the floor for questions. We have a little bit under 10 minutes. So if people have any questions to our panelists on their innovative solutions, on the issues that they're trying to tackle, on the solutions themselves, feel free to pop them in the chat. I know we already had some questions that were answered live. That's great. If anybody else has any other questions, please feel free to pop them there. While people are thinking, I'm gonna go ahead and ask a couple of questions. Oh, we do have one. So Justin Adams, to all of you, great. What are the biggest barriers to scale for these great innovators? So that's a great question. And let's go around the room. Maybe each one can take 45 minutes or 45 seconds or up to a minute just to tell us a little bit about what you see as the biggest barriers. Maybe let's start with Charlotte, if that's okay.
Sure, thanks. So when we look at the forest that needs to be protected, it doesn't come in these huge chunks, right? It belongs to communities as maybe 15,000 hectares, maybe 5,000 hectares. So scaling up means actually being able to work with these smaller projects on a global level, really. So I would say the biggest barrier is just for the companies on the other end of the supply chain to find those community managed projects that have these big impacts. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to bridge that gap between, these complex supply chains of buyers and the landscapes that they're buying from, and link them up with those communities so that they can easily invest in forest protection. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Charlotte. Let's go to Andrew.
Thanks, Carolina. And great question, Justin. So I think from our perspective, it's the willingness of corporations to become more transparent in their supply chains. I think there's kind of a reluctance to kind of open up to kind of this increased transparency. We did speak to one palm oil company several months ago, and they said there's no way that we would have a system like this that would allow our workers to complain, because we've been inundated with complaints, and that kind of defeats the object. I think that you've got to obviously be on top of those complaints to, protect your business in the future, that you don't fall kind of victim to a withhold release order from US Customs and Border Protection. So I think we're kind of moving through a new kind of age, as it were, of increased transparency. And what's really helping drive this is this, increased proliferation of telecommunications into these very remote regions around the world, that now these workers and farmers are coming online. I think that opens up a lot of exciting opportunities.
Absolutely, we're at the cusp of a new era. So let's go then to Victoria.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think in our cases, financing, for the farmers, we have worked with farmers in several places of the world, in Latin America, in Africa, in Australia, and they all have been really, when you go to the farming industry, you think that they are we always done it this way, but it's not like that. They have been really, really open to technology. The problem is being able to afford that technology. And then I know this is going to sound controversial, but many times when you go to funds, you know, for investment or to corporates, in many cases they claim that it's like, you know, the impact is one of the things. But to be honest, when they look at the numbers, they don't really put the sustainability thing into the equation. You know, sustainability is kind of like I think a secondary effect that makes it good for social media. So I think that's I think that we need to put it more in the table and put sustainability as a really important thing, and not just something that will look good in an Instagram video, but something that we really need. So I think that is a big barrier.
Thanks, Victoria. Sustainability worked in from the beginning. Diego.
Diego Hackspiel or Stas?
You can go ahead.
I'll go. Yeah, for us, same as Victoria on the smallholder farmer side. Still, we're targeting those, living below the poverty line. So tell them to wait 5 years to get money is tricky, right? And how to address that cash flow issue. So figuring out other ways to get income through those 5 years. To give them an incentive to plant trees and improve the soil quality in their land. That's, I think, a big challenge.
Great. And the other Diego, please come in as well.
Yeah, I would say that today the process of certification and issuance of forest carbon credits is very bureaucratic because it takes a lot of paperwork and a lot of manual data collection. And we're trying to, work with the different certification bodies to adapt those methodologies and protocols to adopt technology. And I think that if we had a faster, cheaper, and yet more reliable process, we could have way more forest projects credited faster, and therefore the market could grow a lot. I think that that's one of the main bottlenecks in forest carbon today.
Thanks, Diego. Yeah, we absolutely need to start making those connections. Let me just turn to another question on the chat from Judy Rodriguez to Diego. How do you define forests and discern areas that may be a mixture of natural areas with intercrops, such as rubber or cocoa?
Do you think that's for Diego Saez or Diego Hackspiel?
I think that's for you, Hackspiel.
Really?
Yeah.
How do I define forest? I think what we do is a microforestry, and so we're just trying to do small holder plantations and try to plant cluster our plantations are from what, a fifth of a hectare to a hectare. I thought so, but yes, my plantations are smallholder plantations. Combining agroforestry there. I pass it on to Diego Saez now.
Diego, please come in.
Yeah, thank you. So what I will say is that our main focus is how much carbon is being sequestered by the ecosystem. So our algorithms don't care too much whether, what type of trees are there, but rather how much carbon is there. And that's what we're really obsessed for, is to being very accurate on carbon. Now, you can also train an algorithm to detect types of species. Like, for example, we do have an algorithm that can detect deciduous and not deciduous trees. So I think that with enough data, training data, you can start defining different types of crops and even which areas are more actually proper for a certain type of reforestation or conservation. I think that we will see a lot of that coming in the near future with machine learning and satellite data.
Thanks, Diego. We have only 2 more minutes to go. So I'm actually going to turn to David Saddington. We've heard a lot from these really inspiring initiatives. So I think just a very quick word from you on how you see this being taken forward in the FACT dialogue. How does it relate to the work that you're doing on the government side? How do you see this as FACT continues on? Very quickly, if you can.
Oh yeah, thanks so much, and it was a pleasure to listen to you all. Thank you so much, Charlotte, Diego's, Andrew, Victoria. Yeah, incredibly inspiring, and I look forward to following your journeys over the coming weeks, and of course spotlighting some of these fantastic innovations in Glasgow itself in not many weeks' time. So we certainly want to make sure that governments are hearing about this innovation, because as I said at the start, which you've proven exactly right, it is the innovators, it is the entrepreneurs, it is the businesses who are really at the forefront of driving this agenda forward, really trying to tackle, how do we reduce deforestation while also making sure that we do have sustainable food systems, which benefits the people at the heart of this as well. And I want to make sure that as we go forward with the fact process, Glasgow is very much just the start, that we do make sure that governments are continuing to hear these stories, they are also inspired, and that we are all working together to accelerate and amplify your work. So thank you so much all, and look forward to following your journeys in the coming weeks.
Thanks a lot, David. Just in time. Thanks to all of our panelists, both Diegos, Victoria, Andrew, and Charlotte. Really great to hear about the work that you're doing. And just so that everyone knows, the final selection, as we mentioned, will happen at COP, and then the cohort will be part of an accelerator program that will run from November until February. So we're really looking forward to starting this journey with all of you. Thanks again. And with that, I bid you farewell. Thanks, everyone. Have a good week.